Hello, and welcome to Outside the Zeitgeist, an opinion podcast presented by Mook Media. Please be aware that the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of the host platform. Outside the Zeitgeist is funded by people like you, for some reason. And now, here are your hosts, Greg and Charles.
All right, welcome to Outside the Zeitgeist, episode 23. I am your resident misanthrope, Charles.
I'm your resident skeptic, Greg.
Cheers, Greg.
Cheers, Charles.
And say hello, Red.
Hello, darlings.
It's supposed to be hello, Red. Don't forget to dislike, subscribe, share, comment, and most importantly, dislike to share that the feeling is mutual.
And don't call us Shirley. But now we'll get into today's Nightmare Fuel. And to start off, we've got a lovely video that apparently is going around. Well, not going around. Well, it's going around the internet.
Sure it's not coming around?
Well, it comes around, goes around. It's going around the internet, and I am off camera. There I am. Where the hell is it? There we go. It's going around the internet, and people are getting all hoity-toity about it because it's apparently being shown in a school to a bunch of first graders. And let's fade over to here.
So this is being shown to the first graders.
Being shown to the first graders, and here we go.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
That was it?
No, that's not it.
I was about to say. I mean, that's pretty standard.
Here we go.
Pass it, Squeaks! Whoa! Watch it! You almost hit me in the pee-pee! What's so funny, you two?
He said pee-pee.
Do you notice that when you say pee-pee, you giggle, but when you say penis, you say it in a serious voice?
I never noticed that before.
Some children and adults feel uncomfortable when they talk about their private parts, so they make up cute or funny names for them.
What's one for a girl's private parts?
Vajayjay! But what does Scoops mean when he says vajayjay?
He means vulva.
That's right, Kayla. It's important to use the proper words for our private parts.
Why?
Because our private parts are just as amazing as our hearts, lungs, brains, or any other of our amazing body parts.
I would disagree
But
with
our
that.
hearts pump blood, our lungs breathe, and our brains think.
And my ass farts.
private parts do is pee. That's not entirely true, Scoops. It is true that a person pees or urinates through a hole called the urethra in the penis.
Does everyone have a urethra?
They do. It can be harder to see, but girls have a tiny hole in the front of the vulva where urine comes out from their urethra. Urination is actually very important. It helps us get rid of waste, stuff our body doesn't need.
Hey, how come my penis gets big sometimes and points up in the air?
That's called an erection.
Sometimes I touch my penis because it feels good.
Sometimes, when I'm in my bath or when Mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva too.
You have a clitoris there, Kayla, that probably feels
Why
good
are
to
they
touch
showing
the
this
same
to
way
children?
Keith's penis feels good when he touches it. But have you ever noticed that older kids and grown-ups don't touch their private parts in public?
Well,
They don't?
I know
That's
some
right,
people
Keith.
that-
It's okay to touch yourself and see how different body parts feel, but it's best to only do it in private.
Well, if private parts are so special, why do you cover them up?
Because
Can't
they
have
are
my choice.
private, silly.
That's right, Kayla, because they are private.
Hey, Squeaks, pass it.
Wait! Okay, I'm ready!
Oh my god.
All right, so there we go. I'll let
Okay,
you guys start
so-
off.
So, earlier this week or last week, I know I came across the fact that New York City was, I think we mentioned this on Monday, right? New York City was introducing sex education to children in
This
first or
is in
second
a
grade.
town in New York. That's where this was shown at.
I'm absolutely
London,
amazed.
Luton, I think it was called.
So, I think
You
I've
say
come
you're
to the-
amazed? That's who made it, amazed.
I think I've come to the conclusion that we just don't care about the innocence of people anymore.
Well, I certainly don't.
Well, I know you've never cared. That's not a surprise here.
I mean, for now, so your comments on the video itself and being shown to the first graders?
Inappropriate.
Okay.
I don't believe first graders should be made aware of that stuff. By the time you hit maybe 4th or 5th grade would possibly be when I would show children that, because I believe it was in 4th grade that I first got introduced to sex education at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That is right around the time that girls will start to go through puberty. Is around 9 years old, I think, or sometime around there.
Yeah, it depends.
Boys tend to go into puberty a few years afterwards.
What about you, Red? We'll get to your comments.
Yeah, that was a little weird. And look, different parents hit up this conversation with their kids at different times, and it's not needed to go into the full Monty from the get-go. You can always, do a little bit at a time and explain it to kids with respect to the body experiences that they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, what is the school trying to accomplish here? It's sort of like introducing the idea of normalizing talking very openly with other kids and adults who are not parents about masturbation and sort of like burgeoning self-sexuality in children. That sort of kind of smacks of grooming kids to open conversations with other adults, some of whom will have unsavory, shall we say, unsavory objectives.
That's a fair point. Now, one thing that's been going around, that's been circulating around along with this video, is people have been saying that somehow I think they've been saying that in this video it was talking about kids aren't supposed to hug or let their grandparents hug them or hug their grandparents without permission or something like that. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that was probably another video done by this group.
That has to be another video.
Yeah, because there definitely wasn't anything about that in this video.
So in other words,
so with that in mind, does that change your guys' perspective?
So in other words,
No.
you can hold off grandma from hugging, which, by the way, I agree. You should not teach a child that they are required to touch someone else, okay?
Okay.
But you can't touch, but you can certainly talk.
Well,
I think that's a weird boundary to set.
This video, as I understand it, was saying that you need to get that your grandparents should get permission before they hug you or something like that.
What was that? Blue creature, lizard, whatever it was.
Gecko.
Real certain. It looked like a Pokemon to me, honestly.
Of course, it looks like a Pokemon to you.
I play too much of the game. I have too many investments in it. It's getting to me. But was that blue creature?
It was like a lizard.
Was it hit with the ball?
No, it like went in front of him, and he's like, "Oh, you almost hit my pee-pee."
Okay, so I usually only see.
It was a forced introduction to the topic.
Yeah, I usually only saw my friends do that after they got hit. And then they were sort of like, oh shit, I do have something valuable there that I need to protect.
Yeah, well, your roommate's dog doesn't almost hit. He just...
It also...
He's like, hi, how you doing, Charles?
It also introduces to young children the idea of, yeah, you should be masturbating. And it seems to me that you want the child to discover that at his or her own pace, their own way, rather than sort of like opening the door for them and sort of implying the message of, yeah, go ahead and check it out.
Look, Brad, this whole thing tells me that we're just trying to get into the world of South Park, where we not only have Hooters, but we also have raisins.
It's just creepy AF, for real.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up some valid points. I mean, for me, myself, my stance on this, on its face is just I really don't care because it's just it is biology, right?
Yeah.
And you do have parents that don't talk to the kids about this stuff because of all the stigmas around it. Now, for me to go and blanket say one way or another, I can't really do that. What do you got, Riz?
Well, the thing that stuck out at me was that it wasn't just biology. Look, this is the part that boys have, and these are the parts that girls have.
Right.
It went beyond that into introducing concepts of self-sexuality and connecting them to adult sexuality. The message of teaching children, look, it's cute to call it a vajayjay, but it also has, a more correct term of vagina. but isn't how it goes vagina? It goes bulba.
Uh-oh.
Whoop, whoop. Is that
No.
is that your pee-pee calling you?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's Greg not turning off his phone like he normally doesn't do.
Yeah, but
No.
this vid took the additional step of introducing sexuality to very young children, and it's almost as though, what do you have against children? I mean, one of the roles
I have a
of
lot against children.
ew,
Yeah,
but one
Well,
of
you know what I say about kids? They're smaller, bastardized, unmitigated bastard versions of their
Well,
parents.
here's the thing. With sexuality, you can't leave children innocent because then you leave them vulnerable, and that's not a correct execution of the parental role.
Right,
And,
so-
and there's more than one way to get there, but this sort of like gets ahead of parents having their own conversations with their kids like way early, and it's like, what are you trying to do here?
Yeah, but I honestly could see it either way.
I don't want to get too stuck on this
Yeah,
particular topic.
The one thing I will say though, sorry to cut you off, Greg, is
Yeah, it's coming up.
no, I don't. That's usually you.
I'm
But
playing-
anyways, the one thing I do want to talk about is back when I was a kid, and once they stopped calling it grid, we had the AIDS scare. So I remember when I was in 4th grade and being brought into the library with a bunch of other students and being told about sex and whatnot.
How old were you?
4th grade.
Okay. So,
But that was. But now, see, the thing is
that's
that
my
was
timeline.
that was around the time that they stopped calling it grid and started calling it AIDS. So there's other considerations in there.
But that's around my timeline when I said I got
Well,
some
yeah,
sort of
but I'm
sex-
saying is
sex
that
addict.
there's other considerations in that.
Well, other thing the one thing I want to end with is, Red,
Yo,
what was the silly term that you called your private part with your friends?
with my friends,
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what we did.
Did you have a silly term for that?
I don't know that we had silly terms.
Because
Sometimes
the pee-pee term is
I
funny.
pee-pee seems silly to me. I always,
It is.
I introduced children, my own with, with medical terms, penis, but then we jokingly started calling it wiener, just for
See,
funsies.
that's another one I heard. The one thing I can say for certain in my life as a child is that I don't remember there being a stupid, silly term for the woman's or girl's private parts, except for the titties.
I remember when I was in 2nd grade, we were talking about it, and my teachers said the girl's private part is called a tissue.
A tissue? Not fish taco?
Nope.
Great.
That's what she said.
Tissue.
But
And this was my 2nd grade teacher.
but I'll tell you right now, for some reason, all the boys made many jokes out of the pee-pee or the wiener.
So moving on to the next topic, because we've been on this one enough.
Absolutely.
So, because, speaking of families and everything, so here's a fun little story for you. So apparently, something that's been going on in the West Virginia family courts, and probably in other places around the country, is that the family court judges have decided that they were going to grant themselves the right to do home inspections during divorce cases.
I'm sorry, what?
Exactly. These
For what purpose?
For whatever purpose they felt they needed to, because I guess they figured, well, I'm a judge, I can issue a warrant, so I can just issue a warrant to myself to go look at the house or
So
whatever.
If I'm taking
That's
this
not a
literally,
conflict of
and
interest.
usually the literal meaning is not actually what's happening, but the judge is actually going out to the home.
Yep, and this was there was.
Why-
So here's what happened, because it's
Why
been
wouldn't you
happening.
have a social worker of some sort instead?
It's.
I'm
There's
very
no
confused.
legal there's nothing on the books, and I'm focusing specifically on West Virginia because this is where it blew up, because somebody recorded a judge going to his home. There's nothing on the books saying that judges can do it. Also, nothing saying that they can't, which
Just means that we just have to create
There's-
legal precedent for it.
yeah. Well, this is something that they all decided to do by themselves collectively. Like one person got the idea and they all started doing it.
Sure.
But what happened was with this one judge that was on camera, went in. He got disciplined by the disciplinary committee. So now the Association of Judges is getting together and getting a lawsuit ready to go in the West Virginia State Supreme Court to have the chief counsel of the disciplinary committee gotten rid of.
Okay, this reminds me of something that happened in Jersey a couple of years back when the entire system was decided by the judges that they were allowed to keep their pensions because they judged it themselves.
Yeah.
For themselves to be able to keep it, and then everybody else sort of lost it or something like that.
Well, much like the legislature doing their own salaries and whatnot. Although what was it? The Texas governor has line item veto ability on the state budget, so he line item vetoed the legislature's salary.
Oh, that's nice. This is one of those things. Every time there is the ability to abuse power, there is always a group of people or person who will abuse power.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's why most people get into power. Well, most people get into power because they're pursuing power, and you don't typically stop. What do you got, Red?
Well, this is why we have a concept of separation of powers, right? Now, there is historical precedent for judges to, be fact finders and conduct their own reviews, and some current legal systems in other countries have that baked into it, but that is somewhat alien to the American legal system. And it seems to me that if a judge is going to authorize his or her own subpoena to examine a question, and the judge decides the scope of that subpoena, there's no review of that judge's self-deputation of basically supplanting the role of social workers and other people who are supposed to function as fact finders. And that is creepy AF. Fourth Amendment much?
Well, here's more to it.
Unreasonable searches and seizures?
Right, because the judge goes in, has the bailiff escorting him, and it's usually well, not usually, but you have the situation where during the proceedings the one party is not allowed in the home. So the judge goes in, and based on the other parties, this stuff over there, that belongs to the other person. Right? So it creates a whole mess of problems.
We'll have to follow up on this.
Yeah, you can follow the YouTube channel called The Civil Rights Lawyer. He's the one that's he represents a guy in the one case that I think he represents a guy in the case that took the judge to court. Man,
talk about the power of your phone. You need to have that buddy charged up at all times to take video when necessary, because if that person had not had his phone, I surmise it's a man, if he had not had his phone in a ready-to-go position, he would not have had the evidence needed to start pushing back against this, because the complete lack of visibility and the complete lack of checks and balances creeps the AF out of me.
Yeah, I mean, he even, he told the judge even told him to stop recording while he was recording, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Good for him.
I think this guy was actually a federal agent. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well,
Awesome.
Yeah. So
good for you,
buddy.
Good for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Not necessarily abuse of power here, but has anyone heard about the meat and chicken shortages?
Well, I heard beef, but I didn't hear chicken.
Yes, chicken has been getting hit for quite some time. I think even pork is now getting hit. But the chicken shortage has been attributed wrongly, I think, to the chicken wars. There
is it anything like the Congolese guerrilla wars?
No, this is the chicken sandwich wars between all the sandwich fast food companies and all that. And realistically, this chicken and meat shortage has more to do with, at least the meat shortage, I should say, has more to do with the continuation of hacking of companies.
At least that's what we're being told.
Yes, that is what we're being told, all right. JBS, I think, is the name of it. It's based out of Brazil.
They supply a quarter of the country's beef.
As well as global supply. And Australia has been hit by this hacking, and United States. And this
people want to make self-driving cars.
This is very interesting because this is the third, I think, major hack of some sort of critical type of service. We had the oil, we had the...
Yeah, that was a hack and nothing else.
What was that?
It was the gasoline pipeline, that was a hack and nothing else.
Right, absolutely, nothing else. There was another one that happened before Colonial...
Colonial Pipeline.
Before that. I can't remember the specifics, but I know that
don't forget that the Russians hacked the DNC.
Oh, yes. What I find most interesting about all of this...
Oh, don't forget that 12-year-old girl hacking into the voting machine. in Florida.
Dude, don't even get me started on this shit. I find most interesting that the default position of any government agency over the last 4 years, and continues into this 5th year going forward, is that the Russians did it. And the Russians clearly
depends on what side of the donkey fin you're...
Well, we don't know that, Gregory.
Depends on what side of the donkey fin you're cheering for.
I'm talking about over the past 4 years.
Or are you talking about the intelligence agencies?
Yeah, they keep blaming the Russians for everything. I'm potentially worried about the eventual fallout of if you keep blaming the Russians type of stuff, and eventually the Russians actually do something.
Well, that's why. Well, that's
sort of
why
like
I call
that person that cried wolf 3 times and then
Peter
the
and the
time
Wolf, right?
he was eaten.
That's why I call what's her face Ramra, Rachel Maddow, Russian agent.
Oh, sure. But this leads me to my next topic. That apparently the Russia is eliminating the U.S. dollar from their national wealth fund, which is what makes their money worth money.
Yeah, well, Russia has been divesting from the American dollar for a while. They sold off a lot of U.S. debt.
Right, but they've completely eliminated it now, and they've been switching to
I
euro,
think they have like a small
yuan,
amount
and
left.
gold.
Yeah, but China. Here's the interesting thing, because China sold off a lot, but as I understand it, I haven't checked, but last I heard, China started buying up some American debt.
Really?
Yeah, but at the same time, these two are forming a coalition with other companies or other countries to basically forego the U.S. dollar and trade in the yuan and euro.
But this entire thing speaks more to the points we've been making over the past couple episodes. The fact that inflation is already here, that it's going even higher, and if you look at the prices of the meat and chicken, they are going up.
And you still have the repo operations going on, $400 billion a day.
Yep.
So, in repo operations. Now, that's not all money that's being put into, but...
But this is a good transition into one of my favorite topics.
Stonks!
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 Who doesn't love stonks?
Game stonk.
Yes. So I've been following GameStop and AMC and a number of these meme stocks over the past few months. You know, there was the whole thing back in the February-March time period. And GameStop was at its height at like 400 something.
Yeah.
Crazy. Absolute crazy. And I have to assume at that point that was the bulk of the maximum it would get up to at one particular time. But the funny part is, even though GameStop went all the way back down to 40, it continued to climb. And now it's over 200. The close at around like 250.
Yeah, well,
today.
it's looking that it might actually have some value now because and this is not financial advice. Fuck you, people. Because the company has decided they're going to restructure things now. I was watching Nate the Lawyer because he was saying that he bought a bunch of AMC a few days ago.
Yeah, AMC
and they shot
off
up
at like 78 yesterday, I think.
Yep, and last I checked, it was like down to 50.
Right.
Well, no, yesterday it was up to 60, and then today
there was a height of like $78.
Oh yeah, the peak, right?
Okay.
But it closed off about 60, and today, last I checked, it was at 50 and whatnot.
So I heard what happened with AMC.
Yeah, they did a rally.
Well, that's not the only thing that happened. So AMC issued another 250 million. I think it's 250 million shares.
Okay.
Okay, to dilute the stock, and it was immediately purchased by this big corporation, One Financial Investment Group or something like that.
Right.
Were they
And
Chinese?
the next day they immediately sold all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah. Because a lot of people are attributing it to the Wall Street Bets group and whatnot. Which I came across this site, which is called Swaggy Stocks or something like that. SwaggyStocks.com, and you can see they're tracking like what the Wall Street Bets group is investing in. They basically gave the Wall Street Bets group their own index, which I found was interesting. Yeah,
that's hilarious.
So, I thought that was pretty interesting. So,
and something completely unrelated to
and
that.
now for something completely different.
If you don't know the names Buffett and Gates, maybe you know the names Buffet and Gattaz. No, it's just funny ways of saying their names. They are working together, apparently, to build a nuclear reactor, a new kind of nuclear reactor in Wyoming.
Who else was in this? I know you mentioned what company?
The company. Let me pull up the article.
Not Blackwater.
There we are.
Let's see.
It's called Natrium.
Well, that's the natrium is the Latin.
Natrium
is the Latin name for
Terra
sodium.
Power and Pacific Corp. Those are the two groups owned by Gates and Buffett.
I swear this sounds like terraforming Mars cores.
It might be. We might be there 30 years from now. Now, it says they say in these articles I've been coming across.
Yeah, I got one up here.
That it will take about 7 years to build this thing. But the interesting thing to me is that the number one thing I've heard a lot of conservative or right-leaning individuals talk about is the fact that to go green, we could very easily just start using nuclear energy. And I don't know if that's necessarily correct, but I do know that nuclear energy, in some sense, is greener than some things that we're currently using. And as far as green energy sources, it's probably more energy producing than most of the green energy sources that we currently are invested in. What's up, Red?
Well, consider that we are hampered in our country with very heavy regulation on the maturation of nuclear technology. Despite that, there is something called Generation 4, which is a collection of newer technologies to operate. And it's a collection of technologies.
Right.
This is not the only form of it. And there are even Gen 4 type plants that eat the fission byproducts of earlier technology, nuclear plants. So, we get cheap energy, we get rid of a lot of problems, we acquire energy independence, but the greater play is to have more tools to go into space, because whoever owns space controls the Earth. So I think this is all very important and interesting to advance.
You're not going to be able to advance to space so much with nuclear power. It's not as easy for space propulsion. You need something to eject. You need
a pee-pee.
So the natrium reactors, they are a Gen 4 reactor type. Now the thing with this is, again, natrium is just a Latin term for sodium. They're using sodium in the process, which has its inherent problems, because sodium, when it's a metal, so when you're having such high energy as it is here, as it's going to be used in these reactors, well, it can light on fire. And one thing that, if anybody who's in the Navy knows, when metal catches on fire, it's bad juju. Like when an airplane, when a fighter jet catches on fire, the only real recourse, some of the time, depending on which part of it is on fire, is to push the thing overboard and let it explode in the water.
Wonderful.
Now the thing is that it's not, as far as pollution, right? You have to talk about what pollution is, right? So when we talk about the carbon emissions, right? The ionic compounds, carbon monoxide, and so forth from the other plants. That's one type of pollution. The nuclear reactors, well, they're producing a shitload of heat, right? It's the same thing with coal power plants and whatnot. They're all just heat engines, but nuclear reactors operate under the fact that they produce a whole shitload of heat, and that's how energy is produced. So my concern is the heat pollution from these reactors.
I'm sure the heat pollution is going to be insane.
Yeah, well, depending on how much we use it, and what comes of our electrical grid and internet and so forth.
But my thing is, I'm almost certain Gates and Buffett were both in some way advocating for green energy in some sort.
Yeah, I mean,
I find it interesting that they've come together for nuclear energy.
I mean, it could be useful.
Else.
It could be useful if that heat energy was being used to help plants grow, because that is something that can be done. What do you got, Red?
Well, I was going in that direction because that heat byproduct can in turn be an input to a separate system. Say, for instance, greenhouse hydroponic farming, right? That sort of thing. So it's not so much as operating plant on its own, but creating, like, if you will, a systems around that plant to use those byproducts fruitfully.
Nice, wonderful farms right around the plant.
It's an engineering design issue, right? So my sense, look, I have a lot of optimism and belief in humanity's ability to see a problem coming downstream and devise solutions for it when it's a slowly unfurling problem. Like, climate issues of this ilk, we'll be able to sort out and already are sorting out technology solutions for it. So the idea of reconfiguring society seems to be the least useful solution of the lot. But I got to think that this is an engineering design question that still needs to be resolved.
Yeah, I mean, well, like everything else, it's trade-off. There's inherent dangers and whatnot. But my thing is with building new nuclear reactors is the lack of, I mean, if you look at it, you hear that thing that they don't build things like they used to, right? And if you look at the damage,
I agree with that statement mostly.
If you look at the damage that 7 Mile Island underwent, and how little
3 Mile Island, TMI.
Sorry, 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island.
What's the extra 4 miles?
Shut up, both of you. So if you look at the damage that the core in 3 Mile Island underwent, and how little radiation escaped, it was basically the equivalent of people smoking a pack of cigarettes. That was a testament to how
far we'd come.
No, how well things were built back then, and how well constructed the safety features were. But nowadays, where everything's built like shit, and I have all the problems with all the technology, and nothing fucking works, and I just don't trust new nuclear reactors being built, and that's the thing with Fukushima. Where it was built, you needed to build it near a water supply, but you're building it in a hostile environment, relatively speaking, because there's earthquakes.
Seismologically?
Yeah.
All of Japan is a hostile environment under that definition.
The Ring of Fire. It's called the Ring of Fire for a reason.
This is why I play Power Grid, and I don't get a nuclear plant on Japan. Okay, I go coal all the way. 7 cities with coal and oil at the end of the game. Plus cold fusion.
Imagine if they made
we're talking 20 cities there I could power.
Imagine if they made an expansion of that game where you had to worry about the pollution.
No. Come on.
It would change the game dramatically.
Come on. You don't worry about that stuff.
So other news. So Kamala Harris is back in the news.
Why?
Well, you know how she doesn't want to go down to the border, or has been making all these excuses not to go down to the border?
What I know is that I haven't heard from anybody about her in months now, and the last time
Except
I heard...
Except for have a nice weekend?
Oh, no, that doesn't count.
Oh, okay.
That's not a real story. It's all bullshit.
So, her whole thing is, she says that she wants to help South America instead of going to the border. Help South America, right? Let's not forget...
Wait, hold up. Does helping South America mean installing our own people?
I'm pretty sure it still means a continuation of the Monroe Doctrine. What do you got, Red?
Wonderful.
I wonder, is that part of the so-called immigration portfolio that she was given? In other words, help South America to mitigate illegal immigration into the country? I don't think it's that, but is that baked into the reasoning somewhere, as reported by media?
On its face, I would agree that if we stop funding all these coups and everything in South America, and enforcing all these neoliberal policies everywhere, that we might not have so much a problem with people trying to come here. But I doubt that's what Kamala Harris is interested in doing, because she's just another part of the
we
machine.
know she's a liar.
Yeah.
We know she latches onto bad ideas and has just as much of a grift as AOC.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of neoliberal, there's this one other guy I follow on YouTube. His channel is called The Cynical Historian, and he did a really good documentary video, whatever you want to call it, on the history of neoliberalism, and I recommend people checking it out. It's very, very well done.
We call that a docu-mockery?
No. It's this guy is legit. He's
okay, so it's a real documentary.
This guy, he's I think he's going for master's or PhD in history, and he does all these videos and he teaches and whatnot.
Can I get one of those by starting a YouTube channel?
Probably not. But I recommend
guess it'll
people
be
checking it out.
beyond my reach.
But going on from that, we have mystery with an Iranian vessel. Isn't that right, Red?
Yeah, it's curious. Look, it's not like I'm all up on the facts, but the very, very short version, the Iranian Navy is no massive power.
Mm-hmm.
And the vessel that went down is not all that big, but it functions in a key role in supplying the other vessels in the Iranian Navy. And mysteriously, it's caught fire and it has gone down. And it's
Yeah,
sort of
sure.
like, and it's sort of like that monkey meme, with
Mm-hmm.
the monkey looking the other way. Everybody's sort of saying, Israel, did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So-
And with Biden sort of like taking a less of a champion role with Israel, it kind of gives Israel a lot more runway. I mean, Israel has been very open in saying, well, that means we're going to have to take care of our own biz, and maybe Israel has.
So I have to ask.
Yeah.
Has all the tension calmed down in the last week? Because I haven't heard a single thing in the news about Israel or the Gaza Strip
Well, the
or
so-called
anything dealing with Hamas or any of that.
The ceasefires basically have functioned historically as a timeout for either side for both sides to kind of get ready for the next hot phase of the conflict. This is not going to get resolved. Everybody's sort of like reconsolidating and getting ready for like the next fight.
I believe last week, I think it was the Gray Zone was reporting that you had a lot of Israeli police that were going around and going into people's homes and basically just locking people up. Kind of like the same thing of when you had the yellow fever, not yellow.
Or
yellow
like
scare.
what happened in Wuhan with
Well-
the Chinese authorities locking people into their residences.
No, they just take them out of their homes and lock them up, as I understand it.
No, people got locked, like soldered into their own
I think
homes.
he's
I'm referring
talking
to
about
in Israel.
I'm referring to Wuhan. So
Yeah,
whatever.
We're on
they're-
two separate pages.
Yeah, they were going around and taking out Arabs out of their home and locking them up. I'm not entirely sure. It was a while ago, and I didn't really pay that much attention to the article because we had so much to talk about. Like other stuff we got to talk about, which is the faucet leaked.
Oh my God, dude! Call the plumber.
Well, it's not really a leak, so it was a FOIA request on Dr. Fawcett's emails, and
So-
apparently there's still a bunch of redactions in them.
I found a website that has all the emails at it, and Monday I will have my own take on all of it because I will be reading all 3,000 pages or so of these wonderful.
That's a lot of reading, Greg.
Yes, I know. They're mostly one-liners.
I don't believe that you're going to do it because you're pretty lazy.
I will throw this wonderful, wonderful whiskey in your face.
Don't waste the whiskey, Gregory. I have confidence in you.
Thank you, Red. Thank you very much.
Now, here's one thing that I
But-
did have to point
Well, hold
out.
up.
All right, go
I
ahead.
just want to point something out. I find it most interesting that of all the news agencies that went and got this FOIA request, that it was BuzzFeed. I mean, when I came across BuzzFeed like a decade ago, or whenever it was I first saw one of their stupid top 10 videos.
Which Harry Potter household are you? Or not household, what houses of Hogwarts? There we go. Which Hogwarts house are you?
I don't know. I don't care. Slytherin all the way. But
That's what I
beyond
figured.
that,
That's what I figured.
BuzzFeed was this stupid YouTube group that made stupid videos that didn't tell me anything. And it was a waste of time and sometimes entertainment at the same time. And I still find it astounding that they were the group that did the FOIA request. But why? And then all the news groups that have suddenly discovered all this, including BuzzFeed, they're trying to spin it in such a way as if Dr. Fawcett was in the right.
Oh, I do declare it's so hard to keep information from all the public.
But
There-
I did hear an interesting take on it, and this is why Hillary had a separate email server. So if a FOIA went through, nothing could get revealed.
Mm-hmm.
But what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, so one of the things that came out about the leaks is he was saying that masks don't work, right? And he was
Absolutely.
telling this to Facebook and Twitter and so on. And now, if there is no no counter to that in any of his emails, then that means that Facebook, Twitter, and these places, and YouTube, when they're banning people for medical misinformation for saying that the masks don't work, well, then they're straight up lying, which doesn't really matter because, it's
I've come across enough articles and doctors talking about the masks to believe that Fauci's first statement on the masks was the correct statement and that everything else afterwards was actually a lie.
Yeah, well, like I said, show me the math. If your assertion is that the mask can stop the virus spread, then show me the math. Not that hard.
What were you saying, Red?
Well, what's also curious and pathetically humorous is the way that the media is spinning this of, gosh, look at how polite he is when he's so tired. And that's just weak ass soup,
Well, when do you get anything different nowadays?
Oh my God. So, I'm glad that there is independent media. This is sort of like a very weird version that we're doing here, but I'm glad there's
commentary, so.
Oh my God, whatever the hell we are. But the point is, it just further discredits the corporate media further. They should all go down in flames.
Yeah. But speaking of corporate things, right, because this month is Pride Month, and so apparently there was a huge issue with, not a huge issue, but people were making kerfuffle about Disney and saying, oh, this is our first gay character, or something like that.
Oh, God.
A bunch of bullshit. So, in the spirit of Pride Month, I made our first gay mascot. Look at that.
Wait.
It's so obvious that he's gay.
You went back to drawing?
Can you look at all the artwork I put in? Hours
you could
of work.
have asked me to do 5 minutes
hours of work I put into this. Greg.
5 minutes. I could have come up with something better than 1 hour's worth of your work.
Also, I would like to introduce our first lesbian character.
Wait a minute. I thought that was me.
Oh, okay.
Wait a minute.
No, so yeah.
That was pathetic. You could have at least added hair.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to one-up your lesbo, and I'm going to declare right here that I'm going to be a trans.
Oh,
right?
are you?
So I can move up
Hold
in the
on,
victim
hold
of
on,
hierarchy
hold on.
there.
You can't steal Elijah Schaefer's stick.
No, just in this,
He's
just
a
for this
gay,
podcast.
transgender, black, lesbian woman.
Why can't I declare myself as a gay transgender? Why can't I do that? Because it's self-perception, right?
Yeah,
I'm
mean,
sorry. Maybe it is, but I see you too much as a woman.
I still say the same thing about this whole stupid thing about people pride. Like I'm going to plan on going to the Hungarian festival this Saturday because I'm part
Is it going to be sausage?
Are you going to
Beer?
declare yourself Hungarian for the festival?
Well, I have a shirt that says Paprika Power, but
Just remember, if you decide to be transracial for the event.
or transethnic.
Transracial. Continue with my words. You can't declare yourself Hungarian.
But I just don't. I never understood this whole thing. Oh, I need pride in myself for the way I was born. It's stupid.
Pride is in.
See, it's not good enough to do live and let live.
Yeah.
Listen, you're gay, you're trans, whatever. Do your thing, be happy, and so on. It's like this hot need for the validation of others. You can't just live and let live.
It's equally
You have to
as
go
stupid.
out of your way to celebrate the whatever, and it's like, get the fuck out of my face.
It's nothing changes because it was equally as stupid when people were saying, "Oh, pride in the fact that you're so and so family or whatnot." But in the spirit of diversity, and this will be the last topic before we go into our main talk. So apparently the Google's head of diversity. I came up with a new name for this. This is the SEAT director, the sexism, ethnicism, ageism, theism director. I figured
the seat director.
The SEAT director. I figured that covers all 4 major isms, right?
Does it?
Sexism, ethnicism, ageism, and theism.
I call it the die.
What about ideology?
Theism. Well, okay.
Ideology trumps theism.
Okay.
But
it doesn't fit well.
I'm gonna get rid of the I, and we're just gonna call it the seat theory.
But so apparently now he had to put out a tweet or a statement back like 15 years ago that a lot of people are calling anti-semetic. So he's getting the
What was the
Ultimecia
tweet?
attack. I don't remember what the hell it is, but I wanted to
You
point.
talking about it? You can't even give me the tweet.
It's the whole idea is that
Look, if he's anti-Semitic, I need to know so I can avoid him.
It's the whole thing of people trying to compress who somebody is to all being now. Their whole history is a reflection of now, right? And it's another instance of people not acknowledging the fact that people change over time, not looking at anything else. And if people do, and when people do change, what changes and how do they change?
I don't know anything about condensing everyone into one moment in time. What I do know is that if you condense cobblestone into 9 blocks, you get a better version of cobblestone. And if you condense 9 blocks of that cobblestone into another cobblestone block, you get an even better cobblestone. And if you do that 9 squared, okay, you get bedrockium. Bedrockium is a very rare material that I need for my watering can in Minecraft. Okay? And it's modded Minecraft that I'm playing, just so you know.
How long till you get to the diamond pickaxe?
Oh, that's easy, man. I could get to that in 5 minutes. As long as I find the right chunk and I spawn directly above it.
So, what do you got, Red?
Well, to go back, thank you for that Minecraftism, Gregory. I'm very enriched. Going back to what you were saying there, Charles, it just shows you, it's not just the fallacy that you are what you were, 10 years ago or whatever the hell it was. There's no learning. There's no forgiveness. There are no second chances. It's like the worst element of a Seinfeld episode. No hugging, no learning, no forgiveness. You are guilty for everything at all times. There are no second... I mean, how un-American is that? Just crazy.
Are you telling me we can't have a soup Nazi?
No soup for you.
Seriously.
Out, Nazi.
So this leads into our discussion for today, which is the Theseus. Now it's called the Theseus paradox, and I say it's stupid, and I'll tell you why. So let me present you with the Theseus paradox
You
as
say
is.
it's stupid.
I say it's stupid. I'm going to tell you why I think it's stupid.
Okay.
Why?
So, well, first let me set up the whole premise. So this is an ancient Greek thing, as you can tell by the name Theseus. So
Nonsense. It's ancient Rome.
you have a ship called the Theseus, right? And you take a board off the Theseus, or some part off the Theseus, and you replace it with a new part. And that part that you took off gets thrown into a pile. Well, then you change another part on the ship, that old part gets thrown in the pile. Well, you keep going on with this process, changing out parts, but then the parts that you take off, you start building another ship with, until you've changed every piece of the ship, and now you have 2 ships. And this is where I say that the paradox is stupid, even though I understand why it's called a paradox. But the question is, which ship is the Theseus? So before I get into further in explaining why it's stupid, I'll let you guys say anything you want to say.
So in other words, this
So
is
my
a
first
question.
thing I want to point out, sorry to interrupt there.
No,
but
that's
first
okay,
thing
I'll
I want
wait.
to point out is that your document is spelled wrong.
Oh,
There's only one
Gregory.
S in that middle
Nitpicky,
there.
nitpicky,
Oh,
nitpicky.
screw me. Oh, well.
Yeah, grammar Nazi had to come in, had to just... Anyways, beyond that, I would argue personally that until the second ship is built, the original ship is the Theseus.
All right, what do you say, Red?
This is a question of what is the identity? Is it the components or the construction itself, right? What is called a Theseus? Is it the construction with those given elements, or is it the element itself, or is it the design? It's an identity question, right? And like many other questions of this nature, the answer is informed by what is your objective, right?
And Red, you hit the nail right on the head of why
Oh, great.
the
So we can move
paradox
on
is
to the
stupid.
next topic.
Paradox is pretty stupid. I mean,
And so, because here's why it's a paradox stupid, right? Because when you ask the question, what makes it a paradox is you're asking the question of which ship is the Theseus. Now, the problem is, as Red was pointing out, is that a ship is not just a ship, it's also the sum of its parts. Just like people. A person is not just a person, it's also a sum of their parts. And the parts change and whatnot. Now, the reason why this question is stupid is because it sets the framing of the analysis in this linear progression, right? You take one part off, you put it over here, and you start building the ship. You take another part off. What the question leaves out is which part are you talking about? Am I taking the keel out? Am I taking part of the forecastle out? Am I taking one of the Am I taking the sail out? Am I taking the anchor out?
Let me interrupt you there. The idea of the Theseus paradox is that eventually every part of the actual Theseus is taken off and replaced with a new exact same part of it, except for the fact that it is new and that it was not an original piece. And then somehow, which I find quite interesting, somehow they're able to take all of the previous parts and they're able to reassemble it into the same exact boat, because theoretically all the pieces should be exactly the same. So we're not only talking about the wood, but we're also talking about the nails,
the rope, the sails,
every single piece,
anchor,
down to the last piece. So we're talking about you're replacing every single part of the Theseus with a new piece. Okay? Now, there are two ways you could do that. One way is one piece at a time, which is very
well. That's the premise of
aggravating.
the paradox, is doing it one piece at a time.
What I'm saying is, I find it unlikely that you could put something together that is not made of Legos, okay, and then take it apart and reassemble it with another identical set of Legos, and have it be exactly the same, and then take the original pieces, which in my theory are just Legos, okay, and reassemble it and make it exactly the same. Because with Legos, at least, at the very least, all the pieces very easily fit together, and you can assemble them, and you can literally, if you have the set of instructions, make two versions exactly the same with the exact same Legos. But we're talking about a Greek boat, okay?
Right.
We're talking about wood, okay? Wood and
metal
maybe
and cloth.
Right. Okay.
And rope.
Whenever I take something apart that is wood, it never goes back together exactly the same. I would have to probably use a bigger nail, or I would have to use something that allows me to, because once you hammer into a piece of wood, the hole is no longer, if you take that nail out, it's no longer. So I just find it stupid that you could put the boat back together using the other pieces, because it would never go back to. You would have to use something different to make certain, because otherwise it would be damage to the boat.
But that's part of the thought experiment, right? That's what this really is.
We're
thought
talking,
experiment.
the hypothetical would be that ideally you could take the boat apart in such a way that you could put it back together.
In the same way,
But I would say, at the end of the day, Theseus is a plan for a particular. It's a set of instructions that tells you how to put together a particular version of a boat.
Right.
Okay? And it is not, all of the boats are the Theseus at the same time, because they all are exactly the same.
You overlook the variable of time, right? Because Theseus 1.0, right? Or Theseus 0.0. Suck my dick. Anyway, he's going to have a particular construction, and Theseus 10.0, those builders, if it's the same builders, are going to have that much more experience and perhaps build into it practices as they iterate across the Thesei.
Efficiently. Well, we're talking about you would have to. The set of instructions does not tell you how to put it together faster.
No, it never does.
It just tells you that you can put the boat together in this exact way using these exact pieces at each of these different points. So that way it all connects in such a way.
After you put Humpty Dumpty back together again, is Humpty Dumpty still Humpty Dumpty?
Yes.
Yeah, but he's now broken, right? And
no,
whatever doesn't kill you fucks you up for a while.
So Humpty Dumpty is experienced.
So let me throw some more things into the mix, right? Because as I said, the whole idea of making it linear is where the fault lies in this paradox, right? In the analysis.
So when you say linear, you're talking from a time perspective?
No, from piece by piece analysis, disregarding what piece is being moved. So when you take into consideration what piece is being moved, now the thought changes, and the more accurate question is, and the better question to inspire thought about this thing, at least in my perspective, is how does this changing of pieces a movement of pieces affect which one is the original Theseus and which pieces are involved in this transition.
So is Theseus the idea, design of the boat, its arrangement at a particular moment in time, or simply the construction?
Right.
Can you use different materials for the same design and still have a Theseus?
Right, and this is why the whole idea of the Theseus is more of a lens rather than a spectrum, right? Because you have intersection of ideas and parts, and they change at different points and whatnot. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this in particular is because we can relate it to the political spectrum.
Yep, that was pretty apparent. I mean, to determine what something is, you have to navigate the value system. For what purpose? What is your priority? Which means that you have made a discriminatory judgment of what is the objective, and that in turn informs the answer of what is the Theseus. Is it the sole variable? No, but it certainly is a good orientation. It gives you a starting point and potentially a direction towards an endpoint.
Right. Because we, and the more direct relation or the easy relation I can make to the political spectrum, right, is we have people that call themselves liberals and people that call themselves conservatives, but then you have people that don't necessarily fit that model. Like they're
heterodox,
liberal, but they're pro-gun, or they're conservative and they're pro-choice or whatever, right? So
why should that be a problem? That means that they're heterodox.
Classified by their opponents. Opponents.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the whole question is...
Ultimately, those people, regardless of what their nuanced positions are, end up being classified by one issue that they hold into an entire category, which I think is the failing of our modern politics in general.
It's the in general sense, a disregardation of people as a sum of their parts. What do you got, Red?
Well, to follow disregardation, nice. But to follow Gregory's point, it's almost as though people are baited with an issue. Through that issue, people then are basically add themselves, quote unquote, to a team. And through that team, then there's this sophistry of, okay, now you have to follow along and follow the other team positions because you're a member of this team, which is a good reminder that it's sensible to remain an individual, be heterodox, and really consider things not just on a team basis. Because when you consider things as a team basis, you become an NPC for whatever team it is that is trying to use you.
And everybody wants to play Sheeple Bowl.
I prefer Sheeple over NPC, but both of them are great terms.
Well, you know what I mean.
No, Sheeple Bowl.
No, Sheeple Bowl is not
Team Red and Team Blue.
My team is called
NPC
Bojina.
Town A and NPC Town B.
With a B. Bojina. Bodacious Bojina.
Are you sure it's not Bojj?
I like Bojina because I like to say Gina.
Because it sounds like China?
Yes. Yes. Because China's a big pussy.
So in this political relation, what do you got to add? If you have anything more to add to that, Greg.
I mean,
okay, Greg Stonks.
I'm not really certain. I think this really applies terribly much to that.
Well, throw it out there. Let's see if it fits.
No, I mean the idea of the Theseus theory with regards to politics. I see people applying. Okay, I see people classifying individuals as they're a Republican or they're a conservative and whatnot, but that is more of just a way of being able to simplify.
But that's kind of the point of this whole discussion, right? Because the question of the Theseus paradox as it is which one is the Theseus? So that parallels to are you conservative or liberal?
I get you. But I don't see how that actually really applies. Because the Theseus paradox is you're replacing one part with an identical part.
Right.
Okay? And then you're taking the identical part and you're putting it into a new entire...
framework?
No.
Construction.
You're putting it into a new entire construction, not a framework.
Okay.
Because the framework would change the way that it...
It's a same framework iterated in a different construction.
It is So you have, at the end of the day, you're going to have Theseus A and Theseus B.
Right.
And Theseus A is the original Theseus after you've replaced all the parts, and Theseus B is the parts that were replaced, that were reconstructed into the Theseus. So, in my opinion, they're identical. They're completely exactly the same. The difference is the pieces that were put into it. Okay? But the pieces are identical to the first one, with the exception that they have aged 1 unit more than the original Theseus, which has been replaced by the parts.
Okay.
And so because of that, the aged pieces may have acquired experience, so to speak, right? Because the whatever, we'll say nails in this case, okay? The nail holes that you're using are being used twice now to make certain that this piece is put together. And from experience, I can tell you that a nail hole does not work the same way twice. Because if you try to put the exact same nail into the exact same hole, unfortunately, that hole does not behave the same way. It doesn't have the same tightness that the original hole did with the original nail.
So Theseus 2.0 is a weaker construction than the replicated Theseus.
B,
so it's not.
So
it's not exactly the same, is it? Then.
No, but only because of the fact that it has the pieces have been reused to do exactly the same.
Agreed. So got it. It still results in a lesser Theseus.
I get you, but what you're saying is, you're at least as far as Charles has talked, is that you're trying to take someone, we'll say person A and person B, who might have one particular ideal that might be the same, and then person C, who is completely different than them, is saying that even though your view and your view are completely different, I'm just going to classify you both as the exact same view and call you both conservative. Even though you probably are not both conservative, you may just have conservative ideas.
That's why people need to be mindful to not necessarily buy entire packages.
Right,
you have to
monolithing.
pick and choose and earnestly aim to be heterodox, which means that you're not going to agree all the time, and that's actually preferable.
You know what this discussion is making me think of? It's making me think of the
I would never guess.
the end of Babylon 5. You are the one that was. You are the one that is. You are the one that will be. You know what I'm talking about?
Pinky never knows what brain is talking about.
No, it's Babylon 5, not Pinky in the Brain.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
You say, do you know what I'm thinking? I'm like, no. No, I don't. Except I think I do, and then I say something completely different than what you're actually thinking.
It just goes to show you that you don't know me at all, Greg.
Charles, I know you very well, and I know how you do things. I just don't know what you're actually trying to do.
Okay, so let's twist the premise on this. Okay?
Okay?
Let's say we have 2 ships.
Yes.
Okay, and we can relate this to people.
Yes.
2 ships.
Yes.
Built exactly the same.
What?
And we'll call them Theseus A and Theseus B.
Hold up. If they're built exactly the same, that means there's no difference between them in any way, shape, or form.
Right, except for we name one Theseus A and one Theseus B. Right? We just arbitrarily...
Okay, one is A and one is B.
We just arbitrarily name them.
Sure.
Now, we take pieces and start swapping them. And we start swapping them until we've completely swapped all the pieces.
Okay, so now we've created Theseus A and Theseus B, but both of them are exactly just as weak as one another because of the fact that you've taken these pieces and you've removed these pieces and you've tried rebuilding it in... See, what you've done is you've taken 2 DIY bookshelves and you've taken them apart and you've tried saying, okay, you know what? These DIY bookshelves are exactly the same.
This has nothing to do...
When I move to my new place,
Look,
I don't care.
Greg,
I'm just going to put them back together using either of those pieces.
This has nothing to do with a recent trip to IKEA.
I don't know anything about that. Maybe you went there. Maybe you got the Swedish meatballs that are made of horse meat and all that other crap. All I know is that you've made 2 weaker vessels at the end of the day that are called the same exact name, Theseus A and Theseus B.
Okay, but now let's look at that barring the idea that you make them weaker, like the physical limitations, right? So if we take the parts and we swap them one at a time until all the parts have been swapped between these two ships.
They are still Theseus A and Theseus B.
Okay, but is the original Theseus A still the Theseus A, and then the original Theseus B still the Theseus B, or are they switched?
No, they're exactly the same.
What do you think on that, Red?
I'll take a taxi.
Excellent choice. The water taxi was wonderful. They served espresso, and they had a wonderful gelato to go with their trip to Destination Z.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about is what other things can we apply this to in our lives, right? Other things that we look at and we try to separate.
Pointless experiments that go nowhere?
Well, no, but it's so really the whole idea of the Theseus paradox is to identify how a person thinks, right? How they see the world around them, how they interact with things around them. What do you got, Red?
Well, paradox. When there's a paradox, my mind always turns to the question of, is this forcing a false dichotomy, right? Is it really between one and the other? And usually when you open up perspective or consider other variables, then it opens the field of how to think about something. And there's been a great press on people to drive false dichotomies, to really drive a polarization.
Now, whenever I hear the word paradox or think of the word paradox, the first thing I immediately start thinking of is the Major General song. I am the very model of a modern Major General of information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the Kings of England and the Court of Fights historical from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical.
This is where I walk away. I don't see this how is this a paradox?
So a paradox means that there's no right answer, right? So when
is that what a paradox means?
That's what a paradox means, because the question of the question that is typically asked is which one is the Theseus, and that's why I say the paradox is stupid, because
to resolve the paradox, you have to consider what is the objective at hand, so that you can have a pollstar by which to navigate through the question.
Here's another example of a paradox. My next statement is true. My previous statement was false. Right?
My answer to that is
Hold
fuck
on,
you.
okay. I'm looking at paradox. I'm looking at definition here because I question your definition.
Okay.
A seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. Then, down here, a statement or proposition that, despite sound or apparently sound reasoning from acceptable premises, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logically unacceptable, or self-contradictory.
Yeah, like if you've ever played Chrononauts, you flip the linchpin.
That game was fun until it was not.
You flip the linchpins and you try to create a paradox if you're the one that
all I know is when I played the Roach, I wanted World War III.
You would.
Okay, a situation, person, or thing that combines contradictory features or quality. Okay, so the first one was
contradictory.
A seemingly
Charles,
absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when
That's
investigated.
me.
Okay, so Escher's painting of the endless stairs, would that sort of be a paradox?
No,
because it doesn't make sense.
It's more of an optical illusion.
Yes, but shouldn't that also be sort of a paradox?
Because a paradox, typically when you're referring to a paradox, is you're referring to something that cannot be, like a time paradox, right? It's what happens if I go back in time and murder my own my own relative, right? My own ancestor, right? Now it's a paradox if continuity is a requirement.
Okay, so I don't see how the Theseus paradox is a paradox, because it doesn't seem absurd to me.
Well, because the question is which one's the Theseus. That's what makes it the paradox.
But then that raises the question of what comprises a Theseus.
Well, it's on your
and
perspective.
to answer the question of what comprises a Theseus, you have to consider for what purpose are you answering the question.
Right.
The first one is the Theseus, and the second one is a Theseus adjacent.
Right, but here's the thing. It's a question of how do you identify something. Do you identify something as what has always been there, or do you identify something as the sum of its parts?
Okay.
Right, because if you answer something as the sum of its parts...
My issue with this proposition is that it relies too much on theoretical...
abstracts?
No, I guess, but it's... The idea behind the Theseus paradox, this whole thing, is that the pieces do not degrade after you
Right,
remove them.
it's a thought experiment.
Okay, so in an ideal thought experiment, you could say, okay, I take all the pieces from boat A and I put them onto boat B after I've replaced simultaneously all the pieces of boat A.
Right.
And now I make boat B, which is using the old pieces of boat A to create it. But that doesn't account for the fact that all those pieces that you've taken from boat A
Right.
are no longer the same as when they were made for boat A. They are now slightly degraded and slightly
Right.
So it only makes.
Well, I mean, sometimes when you are dealing with thought experiments, you do deal with ideal conditions.
Ideal conditions.
Yeah.
But that's the problem with this particular thing, and this is why I'm going to say it's stupid, is because the pieces from the original boat will not be identical to the pieces that are being replaced into it, because the new pieces that are being put into it, if it's a piece of wood, for example,
Right.
it doesn't have nail holes until you start hitting it into it. It might have pilot holes if you're doing screws over nails, although this is probably at a time when screws were not really a particular thing. But even so, a screw that goes into a hole, and I could say from experience with DIY projects, is that the screws they damage the piece after you put into it the first time because it causes minor scratches.
Especially if you're using cheap wood.
Yes, or cheap metal.
So let's talk about the more practical question then, that the Theseus situation is supposed to inspire, which is a thing more of the idea of the thing, or is it a sum of the parts, or is it somewhere in between? And if it is somewhere in between, at what point does it stop? Does that one part stop being, or that one idea stop being the thing, and the new thing becomes the idea?
It's like Schrodinger's cat. It is simultaneously dead and alive until you decide what it is that you are measuring, at which point it defines how to answer the question.
This is my big thing with all these theories.
Meow.
I always hate these theories because they deal in too many ideal situations.
It's the abstract.
Yes.
And I love dancing in the abstract.
I like them.
But you hate them at the same time. So let's play out a Theseus to your love-hate.
Gregory
So if we were to go to a universe where you could theoretically do these things, I'm almost certain it would be very entertaining and very interesting to live in. And at the same time, very frightening.
Gregory, you're concerned because you don't know how to use this to maximize your points.
Possibly.
That's
she
why you're
called
all
you out.
verklempt.
Schrodinger, the whole Schrodinger paradox is similar like quantum
mechanics.
states and stuff.
Yeah.
And that both states are there, and it's just the moment in time and such.
Right.
Heisenberg uncertainty principle and yada yada yada.
Yeah. And I mean, we could talk about how the Schrodinger postulate applies to everything as well.
It does. It does. Until I step out that door, it could be both raining and not raining, because it was previously raining when I came in.
It helps resolve which way the simulation should go.
But let me get back to my previous question. Now, what would be an interesting thing to analyze through the idea of the Theseus?
Okay, so if
in society,
based upon your previous question, I would say that the Democrat Party is a wonderful thing to apply this to, because I no longer believe that the Democrat Party is anything like the Democrat Party of what it was in the 1800s. I think it's very similar in some regards, but it's also very different.
The Dixiecrats?
Yes. I also think
in the same aspect,
it's
the
good to
Republican
almost,
Party is
I
not
was
the same.
I was about to say, I think this applies to almost any political party in general.
Agreed.
Is that when does the political party no longer become what it said, the original political party? So I think the Republicans, personally today, the Republicans stand in some regard more for what the
it's like
ideal of what.
It's a
people
complete role
thought.
reversal from about 150 years ago.
No, absolutely not. The Republicans stood for something of moral standing and actual fiber, potentially. I say potentially because none of us lived at that time.
Let me caveat that with saying on the face, right? Because again, I'll point to the neoliberalism.
But here's what I want to say.
Video.
Here's what I want to say with this: the Republicans stand more for what they stood for 100 years ago plus. And the Democrats also stand for. No, that's a bad way of saying. I think both the Republicans and the Democrats have changed, but not overall changed much. Okay, just the way they implement.
So they have and they haven't.
They've both changed and they haven't changed. I think the Republicans still stand for, if you were to talk to some Republicans, because I think the people who represent the Republicans do not actually...
Are you talking about these squeaky wheels?
Yes. Yes.
The squeaky wheels are the ones that get the grease, right? And those are the loudest voices of any group.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily represent the whole...
I think they both the politicians that are representative of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are fighting for the same things they were fighting for 150 years ago. Well, I also think that the way in which they do it has degraded. I think the Democrats have gone more on their stances that they had 150 years ago, except they try to cloak and dagger the shit that they're doing. Whereas the Republicans have just moved even further away than where they were 150 years ago, because they're even less likely to try to do anything.
I don't know if I buy any of that, Gregory. I don't know if I buy any of that.
If I do have to draw a distinction in as far as dishonesty between the two parties, I would say that the Republican Party tends to lie to people be dishonest to their face, and the Democratic Party tends to be dishonest behind closed doors.
Yes, the Democrats are very dishonest behind closed doors and open doors too. I think they're both openly dishonest and in the back.
Yeah, I mean, in recent years, I mean, everybody's just lying to you to your face. But
sure,
I think there's a trap in considering Republican and Democrat as a single monolith, because consider that within the Democrat Party there is at play a very vigorous civil war of sorts between the leftists and the more traditional liberal American Democrats.
See, I see it a little differently. I see it between.
How so?
I see the Democrats as a struggle between the people who are slightly racist and the people who are super racist.
Same difference. We're restating the same thing, Gregory. Different words, same destination.
Now, so because you bring up a good point, Red, is the whole monolithic thing, and I try to avoid doing that myself, but let's face it, it's human nature in all of us. But the question becomes, how are you monolithing them, right? When I monolith the political parties and combine them into one, I just want to make this clear, the caveat that is it's only in certain aspects that I do that as. So.
Okay. Taken.
Would you like to understand how I view the Republicans?
Please.
Go for it.
So the Republicans I see as there's the slightly racist and then there's the slightly less racists. Within both parties, I think there are individually good people that are nothing. They're just there, and they try to get stuff done, and they fail because the people who control the parties themselves are just abhorrent assholes to an extreme degree.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Either party, you get elected to Senate, you spend most of your time fundraising.
Right, so I think the biggest issue I've found with the party of the day in either of them is that it seems as if the entirety of getting into power is to stay in power, and so
there's a secondary objective to enlarge your power too.
Well, that's part of staying in power, because if you can't enlarge your power, you never get further, and thus you can't stay in power, because someone else who's more ambitious than you will come up and steal your power from behind.
So let's talk.
So the ultimate result I see is that no actual policy issues ever get talked about and dealt with, and instead they just create policies that only seem to further their own ambitions and sort of do nothing for the public at large.
So let's apply the Theseus
Spoken
here, right?
like a true populist.
Thank you.
Let's apply the Theseus here, right? Because if you want things done, you need power. But when you get power, you may not have all the power. So where is that line between the pursuit of power and getting things done, right? So
how does the Theseus paradox sort of relate to that?
So at what point does a person, this is assuming that a person goes into politics with the intention of actually making changes for the people, blah, 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 sunshine and rainbows and all that horse shit. At what point do they are they considered to have abandoned that and just be pursuing power just like most other people are?
I mean, it depends
Okay, I
on
get what
the
you're saying.
it depends on the philosophical view of what is representation. Is this elected official deputized by their constituents to exercise their own judgment, or is it to implement the judgment of the constituents? Because those two may be very different.
Right, and
So-
and where do they overlap? Where do they separate?
Exactly.
Which parts and whatnot?
I think a great example of this is the downfall of.
Liz Cheney.
No, I was going to say AOC.
Wait,
Same
she had a
difference.
downfall?
No, it was a constant downfall. It was a complete from start to finish. It was just a roller coaster going downhill.
I thought it was a roller coaster of what the fuck.
Okay, so when AOC first got into power, it seemed like she was just repeating talking points that had been fed to her, so that way she would look like she was actually doing something.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas some of us just called her a grifter from the get-go.
Yeah,
Sure.
she's the Paris Hilton of the left.
She's the
Donald Trump of the left.
Yeah, that too.
Absolutely.
Paris Trump.
In the beginning, you saw all these wonderful, and I say wonderful with
Lowercase w.
yes, you saw all these wonderful videos of her trying to call out the people in any sort of thing that she was part of, right? There's like, oh, AOC owns this person, or AOC owns that person, and it's like, what am I watching here? I'm just watching garbage. And you're looking at this, and these are obviously, she had no idea what she was doing.
Nope.
And so she was just using the talking points of other people, okay? And she was obviously
That's
fed
what I
these
do.
lines, and she was giving all these things.
I just
At
hate
a
it.
certain point, she went from reading other people's stuff to just talking about her own stuff, okay? And giving her own opinions. And unfortunately for her, neither the talking points of the people she was being given or her own talking points, either one of them made any sense. She was just talking word salad at all times, every single time. And so I think that it's the point of when you see the switch is when the Justice Democrats abandoned her.
Just us Democrats?
Yes. And
Well, which group? Because the Justice Democrats they're.
I'm pretty certain those were the ones that got her into power. And what's funny?
Yeah, but a lot of them are following suit, though.
Sure. The funny part about her is that she didn't want to be in charge. She was just a face that they were getting elected, so that way they could try and run policy through
But
her.
that's how it always is. People always go after the people that speak the loudest, or they follow the people that speak the loudest, speak with most confidence, and they find the most attractive.
See, and that's the thing.
Right,
that's
that's-
part of what makes her effective is that she's managed, Trumpian, to suck all the oxygen out of the room and be the
And all the cock.
focus, right? And be the focus. You should check the cock basis to see if it has that lipstick ring on it.
What's the cocknosis?
Anyway, but she sucked all the oxygen out of the room and really became the focus, the
I
face
see.
for the position. And that's a
totally right.
very big power play. It helped her consolidate her power position.
Yeah. Consolidator power is definitely something that happened.
Yeah, especially with her lists of all the bad people. All
I'm-
right. So we got to start wrapping up. What's your final thought on this topic, Red?
My final thought is that you need to check all the cock bases and check the lipstick color along all that. Theseus has been very interested, but the bottom line is that in making decisions, you need to have a navigable map. And to have a navigable map, you need to have an orientation, a direction, an objective. And that will help inform your path there. It'll help resolve paradoxes. That
right.
and blowjobs.
Your final thought, Greg.
My final
Or should
thought.
I say Gerg?
Shut up. My final thought is that if you were to start replacing all these parts to begin with new parts and calling it the same name, at a certain point, it eventually becomes something different with that same name. But that point is far down the line, provided nothing actually changes.
What? Okay.
Put it this way.
Yeah, I see what he's saying.
The Democrats were the Democrats for quite some time. But over time, small things kept on being changed in the party.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a very long time before they actually became the Democrats of today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what he's saying.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
my final thought is that things do change, and I think it's important to be mindful of what things change, because one thing we didn't talk a whole lot about in this episode is analyzing the individual changes one at a time, right? Because that's a thing as well, right? Which piece gets changed over and so forth, and how does that change things, right? How does that affect the overall picture in both scenarios, step by step? But things change, and you adapt, and everybody's just going to have a different way of looking at things, and that's something else that you have to adapt to.
Which means that we're best served by being individuals and being heterodox, to not buy entire kits in one fell swoop, but to make judgments within.
Well, I'm best served by people giving me pizza.
Ah. I
I'll
thought you were
remember
going to say
that
something
for the
else.
next time I want to be nice.
You be nice.
Yes, I will bring the pizza over and then I will eat it in front of you.
Well, that is it for this episode. Then be sure to check out our next episode, which is number 23, and will be titled Subject to Humor, and I will spell it right that time. But if you don't want to check the episode, either way, fuck you.
Remember to find us on Locals, BitChutes, Minds, Rumbles, to check out our alt tech extras. And with that said, once again, I am Greg.
Kirk. And I am Charles.
Remember to never question.
Never ask for proof.
Always believe what you're told by the news and politicians.
No matter what. Now go back to sleep, fuckers. Good night, fellow human. You'll wake up tomorrow to cause more destruction and bring much more sorrow. You'll go out and smile and pretend you are good. But once you get crossed, you'll don a black hood. You'll maim and you'll rend, all while you pretend that you are some kind of hero. You can't face the truth, and you'll stay aloof to the fact that you're a zero. You'll sit and stay glued to a spoon-feeding tube so that you can believe you're the best. You'll obey and be bribed by a campaigner's lies. All throughout the COVID murder fest.